I can see perhaps from the room that the gala dinner was a smashing success. Perhaps too good in some instances. I mean, if anyone was lingering at the bar, I wouldn't know anything about that because I'm always the first in bed after these kinds of things. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're very pleased to be here on day 2 of Automotive Logistics Mexico 2016. For those of you new in the room today, my name is Christopher Ludwig, and I'm the editor of Automotive Logistics. And obviously, we're following on from a really fantastic kickoff or first day of the conference yesterday. Many thanks to Penske Logistics, our premier sponsor, who hosted the gala dinner. For those of you who joined us last night, I think you'll agree it was a fantastic venue, great food, and great mariachi. So we really enjoyed that start to finish. Perhaps just a few little housekeeping notes as we kick off today. You might recall that we have our Automotive Logistics Live. This conference is being streamed, and we have a social feed in which you can make comments, you can tweet, and obviously people can also watch the conference from outside. You can get access to that, but we'll put up some instructions on that if you haven't already done it, but please do use that facility. There you go, there's an instruction for it. You've got your registration number on your badge, which is what you can use to sign in. So again, do take advantage of that. You will notice today on your desks some feedback forms. So please do take the time to fill those in before you leave today. I would encourage you, however, to stay until the end and hand them in then. First of all, to give you full feedback, and secondly, because we will do a prize draw at the end of the last session. The prize is a spa treatment, actually, here at the hotel. I believe it's just for one, but I'm sure you can persuade Louis to join you in a pair. He's but seriously, you know, whether you're local here in Mexico or clearly anyone down here is likely to be back here regularly. So you know, it's a great prize. But really, more importantly, it's your feedback that matters most to us. This conference is for the industry. We design it based on what your needs are, and we need to hear from you what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, what you'd like to see improved. So do take the time to fill that in. And again, I mean, I know some people will need to leave, you know, at some point to beat traffic or you know, go to the airport or whatnot, but we have a great full day planned here, just as much information and great speakers as we did yesterday, including, of course, our first panel, but right through to the end, including our think tank sessions after lunch, which is kind of like a round table discussions, a bit more private, and our final panel of the day, which is some really great senior leaders in the automotive logistics industry in North America and Mexico for a Q&A session. So do stay with us the whole day. Maybe before I kind of introduce our panel, worth reflecting just a little bit on some of the things that we took in yesterday. Obviously, Mexico is at record production, 3.4 million light vehicles produced last year. We heard some forecasts that could see that go as high as 4 million this year. Most people seem to believe 5 million plus by the end of the decade. The Secretary of the Economy yesterday, Ildefonso Guajardo, talked about entering the exponential phase of growth following previous kind of phases of the Mexican industry. In this exponential phase, it's not just exploding volumes, although, you know, with something like 10% growth per year, that is quite strong, but it's also added value, technological advancement, improvement in quality as well as quantity. That holds true as Mexico moves towards producing more premium vehicles, and indeed Cristal from Nissan is in the process of obviously building a plant that will build Infinities. We heard from Audi and BMW yesterday. But also this extends to logistics clearly as well in terms of high quality, highly complex operations here. I think we had some great examples still in the planning phase, but very interesting to hear yesterday afternoon from both BMW and Audi, who are obviously both launching or planning to launch plants here in Mexico and building or bringing in those build-to-order processes that they use in Europe or elsewhere, trying to translate here in Mexico the Perlenkette, the pearl chain, this long-distance just-in-sequence, which perhaps may sound a little crazy in Mexico, but this is the ambition. And obviously you need great logistics to achieve that. And that sort of leads us nicely into our session this morning, because we're not necessarily talking about the planning. We've got very large car makers established here, and very obviously, some great logistics providers who want to talk to us about the cross-border flows. Clearly, with the complexity and the integration of the North American supply chain, which sees thousands of border crossings every day, if not tens of thousands, with automotive parts and containers and, of course, vehicles, smoothing or ensuring having visibility and a well-regimented border operation is really paramount here. So we're going to have some presentations from car makers and logistics providers talking us through that, and we'll, of course, have time for Q&A. Let me introduce our panel. We're going to start with a joint presentation from Chris Stiles, who's the Senior Director of Logistics and Supply Chain Management at Nissan North America. He'll be doing a joint presentation with Tim Flucht, Strategic Account Executive at Penske Logistics. We're then also very pleased to have with us Mercedes Figueroa, Senior Manager of Logistics and Customs at Fiat Chrysler Automobiles Mexico. And last but certainly not least, Daniel Hearn, Director of International Customer Logistics at Ryder System. So to kick us off, I'm going to invite Chris to kick off the joint presentation.
Good morning, buenos dias. I hope you guys are awake. I see some brought coffee, so that's a good idea. Just the topic of this, really for this panel, when you're talking cross-border, obviously I think is of pretty significant interest with what's going on in the region now, and I'm going to talk a little bit from a Nissan perspective as far as how we look at the region as basically one network. We've gotten to the point we don't really divide so much anymore between what happens in Mexico, what happens in the U.S., Canada. And along those lines, we launched an LLP project with Penske back in September, part of which is to help manage these cross-border flows for Nissan within the region. So I'm going to give you some perspective from a Nissan standpoint of scope and the connections, and then I'll turn it over to Tim to kind of talk a bit more about how it works. I'll start with just kind of an outline of our facilities in the region. Most of you are probably aware we have a sizable facility in Smyrna, Tennessee. It's actually the largest automotive manufacturing facility in the region right now. 640,000 unit capacity per year, 8,000 employees. We run a 3-shift operation, 5, sometimes 6 days a week, and it's producing 6 models. So the complexity is one of the highest you'll find probably of any manufacturing facility within the area. Additionally, within the U.S., we've got the facility in Canton, Mississippi, also highly complex, 7 different models being produced there. It's also a 3-shift operation, 6,000 employees, about a 450,000 unit capacity at that one. That's also combined within the same network with 2 powertrain facilities we have in Tennessee, producing about 1.65 million engines. Largest that Nissan has anywhere in the world actually is located there. We also produce engines there for Daimler that we provide to them and some other joint activity that we have. And then also part of this network, though, that we're talking about, we include our export parts operations. So if we're picking up from a supplier in the U.S. or in Mexico, for example, parts for within the region, but also they provide parts that we export to other regions, they're all combined within the same logistics network. Additionally, we try to include our service parts operations as well for any current model service parts or things like that, to include them in the same network. So we're constantly trying to consolidate within the same network regardless of where those parts may end up at the end of the chain. And all that in the U.S. is combined with what we have here in Mexico, and most of you have heard yesterday and today as far as each of the plants that are across the country here. We have 3. Currently we have 2 in Aguascalientes, 1 in Cuernavaca. We're about to launch a 3rd plant in Aguascalientes with a joint activity with Daimler there. So that plant is currently under construction. Currently, the capacity for the 3 plants is about 850,000 units. The new facility for the Aguas 3 plant, as we call it, is probably another 200,000. So this all falls in line with the growth estimates that we saw in the predictions yesterday as well. So all of this, again, is really, as we call it, the one network. So we want to keep working down that path to try and find ways to really make it more fluid, to take out bottlenecks, to really kind of make sure that we can optimize any chance we get without separating parts specifically within the network as much as we can. So really what all this equates to is challenges at times. This type of growth obviously is going to create ongoing challenges. Localization within the region continues. I think all the automakers are really focused on sourcing their parts within the region. The more we do that, the more it changes basically the scheme of how our logistics operations need to work. It changes the centers of gravity as far as where your focal consolidation points need to be. So that creates a need for capacity, obviously, but also flexibility. We don't want to be stuck into certain geographical locations when things are changing around us that we may be better optimized to consolidate in others. So the flexibility is key. We have ongoing some capacity challenges, as most are aware, around drivers in the U.S. Even in Mexico, I think there's maybe some concern around drivers. We're looking at revisiting some intermodal options, specifically into the southeastern U.S. out of Mexico. The intermodal schemes normally in the past would run more to the Midwest. Southeast was a bit more difficult to bring into play just because of the geography and the way the rail lines run. But we think we're finally building some momentum in terms of volume with not just us, but with other OEM partners to help launch some new intermodal options that would help fulfill some of those capacity needs in and out of Mexico. And then all this, obviously, we have to really manage from a cost competitive standpoint. In our world, in the Renault Nissan world, we always compete for the models that we get to build within any plant, within any region. So, we have global platforms, so we have to be competitive from a cost standpoint to make sure that we can maintain, really the competitiveness of that product against other options that the company may have in other parts of the world. So really what that means is we have to work really closely with all of our partners to try and maintain close management and competitiveness for each model that we build. So really what all this plays into, and then I'll turn it over to Tim, just a snapshot of today, what we're moving across the border between U.S. and Mexico, about 313 truckloads a week going north and 170 going south. And then we also do have some intermodal that we've been able to launch at this point, looking at about 161 north, 103 south on average. So we're getting some scale, and we hope to keep building on that. And now Tim's going to kind of take you through a little bit more on how it works.
Buenos dias. Me llamo Tim Flucht. I am learning Spanish, but I speak it like a niña right now. So I hope you will allow me to continue in English. I apologize for my voice. I had a little too much mariachi last night, I think. I stand before you representing 10,000 employees from Penske Logistics, about 3,000 here in Mexico. So to the customers in the room, I thank you for your business. To the competitors in the room, I thank you for keeping us sharp. Penske Logistics is part of Penske Corporation. Hey, we're going a little quick there. Can we back up one? There we go. Penske Logistics is part of Penske Corporation. We're organized in 4 verticals. The transportation vertical, which includes Penske Truck Leasing, our parent company, and that's the yellow trucks that most of you see running down the road. Penske Automotive. Penske is the second largest automotive dealership network in North America. Performance Group, which is Penske Racing. So if you follow IRL or NASCAR, that's how most people know us. And if you haven't been by our booth, you'll see there's a racing helmet autographed by Juan Pablo Montoya, and you can enter the drawing for that, so please stop by. Private Equity Group is Transportation Resource Partners. We make strategic investments in transportation-related companies, so if you're familiar with, for example, the Smith system of driver safety training, that's a Penske product. Our products are around 5 verticals. dedicated contract carriage, which is dedicated fleet operations for specific customers. Distribution center management, anything that happens within the four walls of a warehouse. Could be a cross-dock, simple pallet in, pallet out operation, or something more complex, sequencing, kitting, supporting assembly plants. Transportation management, where we're managing the transportation flow, inbound, outbound, or both for a customer. LLP, lead logistics provider, which is what we're doing with Nissan, optimizing the overall network. And then finally, professional services, which is our consulting group where we work on specific projects for a customer on a very short timeline. Taking a look at Penske's footprint in Mexico and along the border. Penske's been in Mexico for about 20 years, which is about how long I've had experience working in Mexico as well. But as you can see, we're organized along the automotive corridor and in border operations as well. Now with Nissan, because of the number of cross-border moves that they have, and in particular some critical parts that come from a very specific supplier, when we started working with them, we recognized a couple of things. One is that, first of all, they do have one network. So in many OEM applications, we see where the inbound to assembly is handled in one particular way. The service parts or export parts are sometimes taken through an entirely different supply chain. Nissan doesn't do that. They feel that parts are parts. The parts don't know where they're going. So they can ride in the same truck, and we can take care of them when they get to their destination. So working within that, we're able to manage about 5,200 weekly conveyances, 27 carriers, 70,000 SKUs, and over 1,000 suppliers. But on the cross-border moves in particular, for this one particular supplier, the border is a little bit of a black hole. There's up to 7 events that take place on the border, from the dray move, the pedimentos, so forth. And you can have 7 different responsible parties for those moves. Typically, those parties are subcontracted rather than directly associated with the OEM. So there's a very loose customer relationship, and sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get information. So what we did was we worked with Nissan and we worked with the responsible parties to simply create a tool that allows us to measure against expectations. So rather than having a border crossing somewhere between 24 and 48 hours, where the first notification that we get that something's wrong is when it doesn't clear in 24 or 48 hours, we've taken each of those 7 discrete steps, and we've worked with that responsible party to develop an expectation for when that should be completed for each shipment. And within that, we monitor each one of those steps for completion for each of the shipments, so that if we start to fall behind on step number 2 or step number 3, we can intervene, we can find out what the problem is, we can help to expedite that shipment, but more importantly, we can talk to the other people, steps 4, 5, 6, and 7, and talk to them about, can you move this up a little bit? So by working within that border operation, we're able to maintain and protect the plants so that we have that early notification that something has happened. We're able to intervene, and most times we're able to clear that out without any difficulty. We get a report that looks like this, and it updates every 30 minutes, and you can see the discrete events across the top. And I will tell you that when we started using this, it's pretty simple. It's red if it's not on time, it's green if it is. When we started, they were all red. And that was because there was no familiarity with being monitored in that manner. So it was a bit of a progression with the providers to start an expectation that, hey, if you need 30 minutes to do this, or if you need 3 hours to do this, that's how long we expect it to take. So as we've worked with them, we've been able to create a couple of benefits by doing this. Greater visibility, so we don't have that black hole on the border where we can't see anymore. We can see into that, and we can see where every shipment is and where it is at in the border crossing process. It gives accountability because each of those 7 parties knows that they're being monitored and their performance is being measured, and there's an expectation that they perform to the standard. It also allows us to be proactive. We protect the plant because we're able to see into that and be more If we have to intervene, we're intervening at an earlier phase in the supply chain. And as you know, the earlier you can intervene, the cheaper it is to mitigate the issue. So rather than finding out when it's 24 hours away from the plant that it's going to take 36 hours to get there, we're able to watch it all through the process, intervene as needed, and work with the customer to make sure that production is always protected. Thank you.
Okay, many many thanks to both Chris and Tim there for sharing some of that. I think you got a sense of the scale, obviously, of and the complexity for Nissan as one example. Obviously, the biggest producer in Mexico, but nevertheless, probably a fairly emblematic of just the kind of how much volume is moving across the border and just how critical it is to have a close view on that. So interesting to see the developments with Penske, and I'm sure it's something we'll return to in the Q&A. Pleased to have with us our next speaker, Mercedes Figueroa. When I met Mercedes a few years ago, I think she had just started in the role back here, and is perhaps an interesting example of a cross-border flow herself, since she's a Mexican and American now in Mexico, kind of as an expat from Detroit. So very pleased to have Mercedes from FCA.
Good morning, everybody. So it seems to be that our Secretary of Economy sent a message loud and clear about speaking in Spanish. However, let's look at it from a different angle. As we all know, Mexicans are very hospitable and friendly. Therefore, I will make my best effort to give this presentation in English for our visitors. So welcome to Mexico City. Okay, so this first slide, the only reason I left it here, I think we have heard yesterday from different speakers about this growth, and then just right now, Christopher emphasized this exponential growth that we are going to be experiencing in the next couple of years. And that sends us the message, again, also loud and clear, that we have to start doing something extremely fast to face and do something about the challenges that we are experiencing right now in all our border crossing points. So what we have identified in our company as some of these main challenges. So the first one is about border crossing capacity. So this is more about the amount of equipment, the gamma X-rays that are available. The number of lanes to process cargo, either the NEC or CityPath certified companies. Yesterday, Rafael Lopez from Ford, he shared with us that his company is certified, as well as several of the OEMs. So the more that we have companies that are certified, it's going to be important to have more lanes. Right now, it works very good. I think around, there is about, in the rush hours, we reduce the time for crossing from 3 hours to 90 to 60 minutes, but this is something that still is going to become potentially a bottleneck. For the second item, the electronic platform, I think right now with the single window, we have issues because frequently it's down. And what it happens is that the system, then we have to start changing to manual process, and then all of a sudden it's up. And then, okay, you have to shift back to use the window. The electronic manifest for rail, ocean, ground, and air has not been fully implemented. In terms of rail infrastructure, the window time flexibility, right now the documents, you have up to 8 p.m. to submit them. So, that's not that bad. For us, it has been working. And, right now for the crossing of the rails is actually 24/7. And saturation for bridges and routes, and here we meant more like the rail tracks that are available for inbound and outbound flows. The fourth item that we want to highlight here is the highway infrastructure. So this is the lack of maintenance affecting the cross speed and the mechanical track conditions, as well as insufficient highway connections to the customs. And the last item, security, is just the additional security inspection that has been added in some of the border points. In this particular item, we don't mention something about theft related to security, just because in the border crossing points, we haven't experienced issues. I think what we are facing is vandalism in some interchange points for rail mainly, but I think right now our colleagues from the MOAR, the main leads, they are doing a great job trying to bring all the teams together to analyze the data and try to see what corrective actions can be set up in place. So what are some of the main actions that the government is taking? I mean, about border crossing time, there have been some important investments in Ciudad Juárez, Tijuana, and Mexicali, mainly to increase the custom clearance models, platform review positions, and operation capacity. We also have the binational customs clearance. We launched this program in Laredo, and basically what we do is that at the border crossing point, we have both the US and Mexican customs clearing the shipment, so then when it gets to the final destination, it's all cleared. The increasing more gamma ray equipment, setting up a risk analysis management program, where what you do is you pre-identify the risk level by company to determine the % of revision of the shipments. Custom clearance through legal representative, and elimination of additional customs checkpoint. In regards of electronic platform, what they are doing is upgrading the platform with new system programs and better communication technology. So eventually, we hope that all the times that we have the system down and we have to be shifting back and forth, it goes away. Also start using the electronic invoice for export operations. For rail infrastructure flexibility, the rail manifest is delayed, so something needs to be done to speed it up. There are some modernization projects for rail, and at the MOAR, it was shared by Ferromex that they are studying to increase the capacity in Altamira, but also for Veracruz, we heard there very good news. Ferromex is going to have new tracks in Santa Rita, and also I think the port informed that they are going to set up the lights so they can operate during the night. So I think Peter from Audi last night mentioned that that will be extremely important, right? Then we can alleviate the congestion and add additional capacity during the evening. For the next item, economic multimodal corridor among the Gulf of Mexico and Pacific Ocean ports, which I mentioned also in highway infrastructure. Most of you are aware that the government is working on creating these 3 corridors to connect in the north from Altamira and Matamoros to Mazatlan, in the center, Manzanillo and Lázaro Cárdenas to Veracruz and Tuxpan, and the Tehuantepec area from Salinas Cruz to Coatzacoalcos. The last item for security, well, they're adding additional federal police resources, and then continue to establish the next CityPath PIP security programs of mutual recognition. So what are the main actions that we have to be working to mitigate or eliminate the main border crossing challenges? For border crossing time is reduce custom inspection to certified companies, extend custom operation hours where needed, dedicate more fast lanes for automotive sector, especially now that there are more companies that are going to be certified and the volume is going to continue to grow, increase the infrastructure for non-intrusive inspections, comply with custom inspection cycle time, address intermodal customs inspections at destination point, and homologate instruments of international traffic with US and Canada. For electronic platform, hopefully we can complete these manifest projects by ground, air, rail, and ocean. Implement a single platform for non-tariff regulations compliance, but with an automated criteria authorization. Set up a permanent import process homologation with US Customs Border Protection. Establish a single customs declaration between US and Mexico so we don't have two. And then like Tim was mentioning in his presentation, if we could reduce the number of touches, right, at the border, I mean, for the dredge, I mean, the carrier that we contract, they have to subcontract the service for the dredge instead of being themselves the ones that are able to cross the final cargo. The last item is develop multi-customs and multi-transportation mode for certified companies. I think most of us have had issues when sometimes there is an emergency and we have some material that is coming by rail, and then we have to stop the cargo and change certain parts and moving by truck, and then you have to create a new authorization. For rail infrastructure, it's just flexibility on the window interchanges, perhaps more infrastructure in Nuevo Laredo, assess the infrastructure needs in Reynosa, extend the binational custom clearance that I mentioned that it was launched in Laredo in other border points, and continue to increase the gamma ray equipment. For highway infrastructure, accelerate the economic multimodal corridor that I share with you between the Gulf of Mexico and Pacific Ocean ports, and better infrastructure in general. And for security, coordinate security programs with industrial chambers, and design import and export secure routes. And don't forget to continue supporting the sub-teams that MOAR is creating to attack the vandalism problem in Mexico. So for my closing statement, what I thought that I wanted to convey to you is that the key challenge that we are going to face is to how we're going to balance the additional demand that you saw definitely clear in all the presentations from the different speakers yesterday, with the supply by continue making new capital investments, or better, speeding them up, including equipment such as truck and rail. But I think more importantly is the underlying infrastructure, mainly for road, rail, and customs facility at all crossing points. As OEMs, we cannot control these investments, but we do have control over collaborating with each other, like Rafael Lopez also mentioned yesterday in his presentation, either by finding synergies or emphasizing the industry needs to the government and related entities to achieve the necessary infrastructure growth. So I welcome you all OEMs attending today to begin a new era of collaboration. Thank you.
Okay, gracias, Mercedes. Again, thank you for taking us through many of those interesting programs and details around the border, and I think ending there on a very important note about collaboration, whether that's directly with car makers or indeed in communicating with the government and officials. So thank you again for that. Our last speaker before we enter into Q&A is Daniel Hearn from Ryder System.
Good morning, everybody. I didn't have coffee this morning, but I did have some Red Bull, so I'm wide awake. Again, my name is Dan Hearn. I'm based in Texas. I actually lived in Laredo, Texas for a little over 9 years, 3 months, 3 weeks, 2 days, 16 hours, and 15 seconds. So Laredo is a very important port, but it's also important to know both sides, both the Laredo side and both that Laredo side and the Nuevo Laredo side, and that goes for all the border locations. My role within Ryder is to ensure that all of our border locations from California to Texas are sustainable and that we're meeting and exceeding our customers' expectations, and the way that we do that is through lean methodologies. And we'll go into that in a little bit here soon. So there are challenges at the border. In 2014, our border crossing numbers were a little over 133,000. We just finished 2015 with almost 142,000 border crossings from all borders, California again to Texas. So with that does come some challenges. Business is increasing. 49% of manufacturing companies are considering going to reshoring. Let me up on the slide. 49% of manufacturing companies are considering reshoring by 2020 to the U.S., And then the nearshoring is also thriving in Mexico as we speak. We have 2 common and close languages. We're in less than a handful of time zones. It's easier to do business with each other. It's faster to market. All right, what's the impact of Mexico automotive manufacturing in the NAFTA countries? So between 2014 and 2020, we're expecting $2 billion of OEM investment and expansion in Mexico. So it's very significant. So in terms of sustainability, we have to be prepared to meet and again exceed our clients' expectations. And the other important note on here is that about 70% of the total production in Mexico will be exported to the U.S. That number is going to be 17 units, 17 finished vehicles into the U.S. market by 2020. All right, so let's look at our top border locations. So Laredo, as many of you know here, is the largest inland port in the United States for truck crossings, right? So in 2014, there was, in the marketplace, there was about a little over 1.5 million truck crossings, and that number increased significantly last year as well. And for the next conference, we'll have that number for you. Followed is Otay Mesa. For those of you that have been there, many people recognize Otay Mesa with its sister community of San Diego, California, then followed by El Paso, Texas. What's interesting about this slide is that although Laredo has been on fire since NAFTA, and California and El Paso are also on fire, what's very interesting with this slide is when you look at those locations, you're looking at the amount of population and human capital that you have to work with and to pull from at those locations. You also have to look at the cost and the availability of land in those locations. So if you look at Laredo, there's just a handful of landowners. Many of them, the landowners there that own tens of thousands of acres, have owned the land since it belonged to the Crown of Spain, since it was sovereignty, and they're hanging on to it, and they're the ones that are really setting the price on the local market or benchmarking the local price. So as Laredo is continuing to expand in Otay Mesa and El Paso, we shouldn't forget about locations like Del Rio, Texas, and Acuña, where the cost of land and there is human capital in that area that can be pulled from. So what was trending yesterday, what's been trending for the last 20 years, could slightly trend into other locations where we could see expansions. So that's something that we all need to be prepared for, is to go where our customers are headed. All right, southern border truck crossing trends. So since 2009, truckload border crossing has increased 26% in the southern borders. And just in Laredo alone, truckload border crossing has increased 41%. That's 36% of truck crossings in the southern border ports. That's increased demand, congestion, requirements, technology. So how do we ensure that we're meeting and exceeding our customers' demands? We talked a little bit about lean methodologies. So lean's typically broken up into 4 pillars, and if you're in the trucking industry, you also add safety as one of your pillars. So we talk about voice of the customer. What is it that our customers want? They want seamless transportation, low dwell times. They want that freight to get to Nuevo Laredo, and they want to get it to Laredo, Texas in a minimal amount of time. And then we have our internal customers, where you have a minimal amount or a limited amount of human capital. You have to ensure that you're sourcing the right folks so that they stay with you and that they have longevity so that they can become operational excellence individuals in helping to support our customers' needs. Then processes. Most of us here talk about processes on a daily basis. So out of all the programs we're talking today, the CTPAT, the NEC, the technology, what I really encourage my folks to do is get out from the cubicle and go to the shop floor. You may be in a warehouse and you may be a manager, but you can't sit in your office all day. You have to go to where the work is done. And when you go to where the work is done, you find the experts on the floor doing the job, and you have the opportunity to not assume what's going on, but to realize and to look at what's going on, and to help airproof the supply chain by developing countermeasures for continuous improvement. And then you're really standardizing so that work function or those workflows can be replicated across customers. Then learning and growth. Make sure that we're training our folks, that we're giving them the best possible training, and that we're cross-training them. So if somebody doesn't come in, or if they're on vacation, they can go to service that customer at that location, or they can go to another border location and backfill. Then safety. Ensure that you have the best system and training for safety. But even the best can be checking the boxes on the computer. Management needs to make sure that they're actually walking the shop floor, going with the drivers, looking that they're doing their check calls, that they're doing their inspections, that they're ensuring that the seal is on there. And then if you excel at listening to the customer, implementing continuous improvement for the customer and their supply chain, the processes, the learning and growth, and the safety, then you get to your financial piece, which is making sure that you've reduced all the non-value added work. You've reduced, eliminated, or streamlined everything so that you're giving your customer the best possible service at the best possible price. And then when we do that, we set stretch goals. So we work with our customers in partnership, and we develop goals, and we develop targets, and that may be reducing dwell times at the border. But when we do that, sometimes we go beyond our comfort zone and we set stretch goals so that we can attain them and deliver superior results to our customer supply chain. Sorry, I missed that slide, but those are the 5 pillars. So voice of the customer, processes, learning and growth, safety, and financial. So cross-border challenges. By a show of hands here, how many folks have been to the U.S. side of the border to visit their customs broker, freight forwarder, or transportation provider? Okay, and then how many have actually crossed the border and gone to the other side? All right, so similar amount of hands, but typically less hands. So what I encourage folks to do is not just go to where you're having your main communication with, if it's on the U.S. side. I encourage folks, our customers, our partners, to go to both sides of the border. So go to Nuevo Laredo, go to Otay Mesa, go to Juarez. Look at the size and the location of your border, your logistics provider. So if you're looking northbound, which is where most bottlenecks occur, northbound it's the supplier, the shipper, they're putting the seal on the trailer, it's going northbound to Nuevo Laredo, and it arrives in Nuevo Laredo, and guess what? Where's the paperwork, right? Where's the documentation for the Mexican customs broker, for the U.S. customs broker? So now a lot of folks are using email, but that's really not probably the best way to do it. Look to your service provider to have a document management system where the customer, their supplier, the shipper can send in their documentation that they need to export for the customs broker to have, and that's in real time. So if the supplier is relying on email or fax, transition them away from that, get them into your service provider's transportation management system, have them upload the documents there so that everything is available in real time. So the trailer arrives to Nuevo Laredo, so you're looking for the seal, and then you're looking for CT PAT inspection. So that 17-point CT PAT inspection when you're visiting the Mexican side of the border, walk that process. Look at one of your trailers come in. Look how it's being inspected, how it's being recorded. Look where that information is being archived, and if there's a defect or something that needs attention, how is that being looked at and how is it being addressed? And then being CT-PAT certified and NEC certified is one thing, but also see where your service provider is exceeding the expectations. In our case, we have drug dogs that do and are part of the inspection. So you'll see those canine units at our location when you come visit us. So in red, how can the provider effectively, we're talking the logistics provider, effectively share information with customs brokers and freight forwarders in real time to reduce manual work, to ensure that information is clear and concise the first time. That's through a TMS system that can offer document management storage for the records that are coming in, so it's all shared. So again, we're talking to do a Gemba walk, a go look, go see. So bids go out to service providers, and they're looking at the people, the prices, the technology, but I encourage you, when you're looking at those bids, again, go look to see where the work is being done and how effective your service provider is at executing that work on both sides of the border. Review the people, the processes, and the technology. Ask for dwell time reporting on the border crossings, and then do a deep dive into those metrics if you're already a customer. And look at the drayage connections. How secure are your drayage connections? Who is that drayage service provider? How well integrated are they into your logistics solutions provider? Inspect the tractors. Your freight's going across and it's very valuable. That tractor that's just commuting for a few miles needs to be in the best condition. And if there's something that needs to be addressed with the trailer or with the tractor, then how is that maintenance executed to support a speedy fix of the tractor or the trailer? Is there on-site maintenance that can support a quick fix to get that across and address the issue? Or does somebody have to be called and you have to wait hours or days to get something fixed? And this is just an example of security monitoring. Again, CT-PAT inspection, making sure that, that their CT-PAT, we're exceeding it. We have the K9 units, 24-hour surveillance, electronic card access. You can open and shut down the facility in a matter of seconds. And so I guess really here the moral of the story is when you're looking at bidding out to service providers, please go to both sides of the border. And when you go, don't just sit in the conference rooms, actually walk the processes with your service provider. And if you've chosen them and they're already there with you, work on continuous improvement projects, because if there's technology platforms and there's people and you have all of these certifications, harness every bit of that, because all those things are very important to look at and to do a deep dive so that you can reduce your dwell time and you can reduce your defects and you can reduce your inventory carrying cost and help make the border transparent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you again, Dan. I think it was reasonably encouraging to see the number of hands that sort of go up to show that this is probably, excuse me, this is probably not an industry that does work too much out of an ivory tower. So, but I do think it's good, obviously good advice to remind people to go to the shop floor and go to the warehouse and see the operations live as they're happening. Okay, so we've had an interesting set of presentations there, kind of looking pretty extensively at different strategies for improving the border, both from logistics provider and OEM side, as well as some initiatives from the government. We've got, we've got some time for questions, so we're going to do the usual process. We'll have some mics roving around. Anyone who has a question, you have say your name and company. Do we have any questions? We have right here in the front we can start with.
Good morning. My name is Bill Pollock from Convertible Trailers. This question is to Daniel Hearn from Ryder. I appreciate your presentation. Lots of great information in there. I'm not sure if you can answer my question, but what jumped out at me there on one of your charts was the Laredo border crossing specifically. You had truck and trailer crossings. I don't think I could quite understand or quantify those crossings, but what caught my attention was that there was as many empty rail car crossings as there was full rail car crossings. On the trucking side, it was looked like about 30% empty crossings versus the full ones. My question is Ryder doing anything about trying to capture that capacity in some sort of meaningful, productive way?
Yeah, so good question. I am, and I can get back to you with more information. I'm very focused on the truck border crossings, and I'm not really getting involved at this point on the rail. But we do, as an LLP, have folks that are involved with the rail part of that. So I would definitely have to get back with you on the, to reply to your rail question on the empties. Yes. And I'm sorry, the name of your company, please, again?
Bill from Convertible Trailer. Bill from Convertible Trailer Manufacturing. We're a company that is focused on doing something about all the empty miles in road, rail, and ocean, specifically in auto logistics, trying to bring the auto logistics industry closer to general freight logistics, try to gain some benefit from the two sides, because automotive really does play by itself often, especially on the automotive outbound side.
Yeah, we're definitely looking at, obviously, optimization, as many logistics providers are. So we would certainly like to engage with you after this module and review that with you. There's some other folks with Ryder here that we can talk to.
Thank you.
I can sort of put that point a little bit to some of, maybe to Chris or Mercedes or even Tim, if you have visibility. Is that something that you see reflected in your networks? And I mean, Chris, I think your intermodal looked a little bit more balanced than your trucking based on the slide that I saw, and I'm not sure what the case might be for Fiat, for FCA.
Yeah, basically, you're, depending on your supply points, you're going to have imbalances at times. And then if you're talking parts, yeah, we try to balance the intermodal as much as we can. For truck, it can be a bit challenging just because of the way the sourcing is going at this time. I think, Bill, you mentioned on the outbound side, as far as finished vehicle containers and trying to optimize somehow for empties coming back. To me, the challenge there is, you know, you've got a lot more export volume coming out of Mexico in rail cars from a finished vehicle standpoint. So obviously you got to get empty rail cars back in to refill. And if you guys are looking at some platform to do something different with those rail cars coming back that's not a finished vehicle, then yeah, I think you would see if that's an option. I'm assuming that's kind of the approach you guys are taking. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions from the floor? We have a question towards the back there. Oh, excuse me. We'll come to you there in a moment, but we'll start in the back. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Juan Carlos Villa with the Texas A&M Transportation Institute. Thanks very much for the presentations. They were actually pretty good. I have two questions, one for Mercedes. When you were referring to specific infrastructure needs, were you talking about for northbound or southbound shipments? So basically, is it in the US or Mexico or both? And if you can elaborate a little bit more about that, especially for roadway access to the ports of entry, that'll be interesting to learn a little bit more about your plans. And then the second question is for all the panel members. What is the key variable in related to border crossing? Is it time reliability, cost, risk? If you can also elaborate more on that. And finally, do you see drayage ever changing or disappearing at the border? Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to take the first question. So you were asking me a very broad question about infrastructure. I think within my whole presentation, I gave some examples of like Veracruz. Ferromex is going to invest these additional tracks in Santa Rita, so that's going to help. And then also like the port authorities providing light in the evening, so then you have a third shift that is going to be able to process more cargo. In Altamira, we also struggle with congestion and capacity. Ferromex stated and shared, as I said at the MOAR, that they are finishing their study to increase rail capacity. Then in the border crossing points, in the land border crossing points, I gave examples of Juarez, Mexicali, Tijuana, of what they have been doing. So similar things need to be assessed of what else is required, especially like Daniel said for Laredo, which is one of the border crossing points with the highest volumes. We mentioned that we have issues with the number of lanes to cross, the fast lanes dedicated, And then I think finally also Lázaro Cárdenas will be another border crossing point that needs an assessment of what else is required. But in general, I think we all know that the federal government has different programs. We need acceleration, and I think the person that presented from your group yesterday, these studies and trying to identify what are going to be the key bottlenecks that we have to attack. I mean, we have to get to a point how we're going to make it happen that then we have the right push into the system so then we see actions in place fast. So I hope this answers your question.
Does anyone want to take part two?
I'll start. I think if you look at the border, let's do something a little different. Rather than looking at the way it is now, let's say if we were going to design a border crossing from scratch, by a show of hands, how many of you would design one that looks like the current Laredo crossing? Can you turn the lights down? I can't quite get it down. Right. So if you ask me what I want for Christmas, I want a pony and a unicorn. If you ask me what I want on the border, I want a simplified process. I work with companies in Toronto area, and they're worried about how long the border crossing between Windsor and Detroit takes, because they're worried about their competitiveness, and they're worried about losing business to other geographies. And we kind of tell them, you know, your border crossing's pretty good. I can show you another one that's not quite as smooth. The multiple handoffs, the multiple responsible parties, the subcontracts, all of those are a very convoluted way of doing business. It's not simple, it's not neat, it's not lean. And none of us would design it that way. So we look at what we have and we try to make it incrementally better. And so we look at this evolutionary process of how we can change things and make it slightly better. And I would challenge this group that slightly better is not how we do business, that we should be looking at something more revolutionary and how we could change that significantly. When you talk about border crossings of up to 2 days, and you talk about the inventory and the dollar value of that inventory that's being held in limbo at the border because we don't have a unified crossing document, that's ridiculous. And for companies of the size represented in this room to allow that to continue and not to lobby for that to be changed immediately, rapidly, quickly, I think is something that we all share the blame for, that we should be more demanding and we should look for those processes to improve much quicker than they have so far. This is, in my opinion, one of the greatest industries in the world. We have products that improve people's lives. We provide great jobs for people. Why do people fight for an assembly plant? Because they know when that plant is located, that area is going to become middle class within 5 to 10 years. What other industries can say that? Why do we settle for mediocrity in the border crossings? Why do we not demand that there's a revolutionary change, that they get their act together, we create a single document, and we speed that process up?
Thank you, Tim. It's stirring words, although I'm still not sure if there's more chance of seeing you come here astride a unicorn next year than to get that wish. So. You know, the Secretary referred to it yesterday, and I think it was brought up last year. I mean, there have been some changes to the trucking, you know, the cross-border trucking regulations. I think technically the U.S. is allowing, or does allow to some limited extent, Mexican truckers to come into the country. Is just not having any impact yet for automotive? It's just not built into the system, or there's just not enough, or, you know, is there any examples that you're using of that right now?
I can comment on it. I think a lot of that right now is dependent on the Mexican trucking companies and their interest to do that. I mean, it's one thing to say that they're allowed to, but it's another thing for them to have the right business case and really the right infrastructure, really understand the risks that they're going to incur by sending equipment, drivers from Mexico to operate within the U.S. I think there's some economies there behind the scenes that people don't talk about as much, that are those companies truly interested?
Right.
And I think in the future, it may be good to have somebody representing maybe some of those companies to have that discussion. So.
Yeah, that would be a good challenge for us as well, I think. I think we had another question here. We're going to go here. This is up first, so third row in the middle here. Gavin. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Stuart Jones from Dallas, Texas, and we own and manage the Dallas Global Industrial Center there. It's just under 5 million square feet of buildings on 400 acres with an adjacent 8,200 foot airstrip. It is now available because the former defense contractors, which was built with government money, have vacated and we're preparing it for the market. My question is, I've seen that Laredo is far and away the busiest port. Land port. We know of the NAFTA highway. My question, is there a location north of Laredo that represents the bullseye in logistics? Is it perhaps NAFTA highway at I-20, the most drivable interstate in America, or is it somewhere else? We're here to see if we might provide services to those of you who are trying to reach this goal in 2020 of the 5.3 million vehicles.
Well, I think just closest north of Laredo, you're going to find San Antonio. It's a former military base that's now used, it's been privatized, and rail does go there, and there is some airstrip movement there at that location, but it's very tactical. It's not very strategic in comparison to Dallas, which is a very big hub for many, not just for the logistics that we're in, but for people in big Fortune 500 companies to get their folks in and out on flights. So Dallas is really one of the lowest places in the southern area of the United States where all roads in the Texas border can lead to that location for key distribution to the rest of the United States heading north.
We're 2.2 miles down the street from the record-setting General Motors SUV plant, so I thought our logistics were somewhat parallel to theirs.
Very good positioning.
Okay, thank you. I think there was another hand up right there in the back.
Good morning, Hector Garza from NIMAC. This question is for Mercedes on her presentation. I have two simple questions. The first one is, how do you channel your requirements or your demands to the government on highway infrastructure? Is there a group or a forum of OEMs that collect all the demands and channel them through any government agency? That's the first question. And the second question, your presentation was optimistic on the infrastructure from the government, but going through Laredo and going through the highway from Monterrey to Laredo, you actually see the condition of the highway, and it's not very good, okay? It's been bad for the last 20 years, so I don't see that much going on. So I don't know if you can elaborate on that, and if you have some feelings, if you have some, let's say, signals or information from the government, if they're going to do anything better on that particular road, particularly on the Tamaulipas side. Thank you.
So I think I'm going to answer both questions together. In our group, we have our customs manager, who is the main person that is the one that works together through the AMIA, and then there's some OEMs there that participate as well. That's right now one of the main avenues that they try to define ways to reach out to the government to express their needs, but something specific into the infrastructure for the highways, and then for this corridor for Laredo, Monterrey, that we have led specifically, we don't have any efforts yet that we are pushing that happens.
Thank you. Question from my side for Chris at Nissan. You mentioned, and for Tim, I suppose, as well, to comment on, the LLP relationship with Penske is fairly new. I think you said it started in September. So firstly, is this a new approach for Nissan altogether in terms of the LLP, and maybe following on, because LLP is broad and can have quite various, ranging from kind of the 4PL carrier management of the network and doing all the engineering. Can you give us a little sense of how deep that relationship goes right now?
it's not necessarily a new approach as far as incorporating an LLP. It's an enhancement to what we had done in the past. We felt like we weren't really getting to the right level of opportunity of how we manage the network. So that's really what was established to really kind of take us to the next level of capability to manage the network overall. It also includes just our inbound networks in the U.S. as well. So it's really trying to get us to a better level of performance.
And then Tim, Penske has other LLP relationships.
We do, and
so,
as you mentioned, if you ask someone to define an LLP relationship, it's always going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
So in each of our LLP relationships with customers, the services may change a little bit, but the whole idea is to work with our customers to help them be very successful. And so what can we do within that supply chain to make our customers successful? How can we save the money, improve the performance, reduce the inventories? What are the levers that we can help them move? And maybe there are some stretch goals within that where we look at something and say, this isn't something that we can do today, but it's something that we can think about and work towards in the future. There was a question earlier about combination of freight, and we've seen, I mentioned earlier and Chris mentioned that Nissan has one network, so they don't segregate their pieces and parts. The material flows, it's all the same thing through the network, and it separates when it gets to a needed point. When we talk about combining with other customers, whether it's other OEMs, that approach is very helpful, because the more you just think about parts as parts and freight to move, the more effective you can be. We've combined with industrial manufacturers, but once you get outside of that manufacturing base, it's very difficult to combine the freight because there's a perception issue. So if a trailer is hauling auto parts today, there's not a lot of willingness to let that haul fresh produce tomorrow. So there's some issues that we have to work through as we work with our customers on how we can further optimize those networks, but it's certainly something that we look at both now and in the future.
Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, for the gentleman from NAMAC, yes, the road infrastructure is a challenge, the amount of kilometers, mileage, lanes, all of that. And so one of the ways to communicate, there's a few nonprofit organizations that have members from the US, Mexico, and Canada, and I'd be more than happy to share that information with you after this conference. It's the Border Trade Alliance. Then you have the North American Super Corridor Organization, which has heavy political representation from Canada, the US, and some political representation in Mexico historically. And then you have the Free Trade Alliance that is based in Texas and goes all over the world promoting trade and does work with Mexican government entities, both on the state and the federal level here in Mexico, to convey what the needs and the challenges are and how to overcome those. So if you get with me after the conference, I'd be more than happy to provide you with some contact information.
Thanks for that. Question from the very young man here in the front.
And good looking.
I wouldn't go that far. But, although if you've had as much mariachi maybe from last night.
My name's Louis Yakumi. I'm from Automotive Logistics. It's more of a comment, really. We've said how do we convey the information to the relevant bodies in the government. A conversation I had with someone in the Secretary of Transport's office from Mexico said people keep coming to us and saying, we want better roads, we want to ease the port congestion. Well, all the questions that we talk at our conferences and regularly around the world. But he said they're too general. When we go back to them and say, okay, tell us what do you think your figures will be? What exactly do you want? Can you give us real forecasts? You're expecting us to invest money, but you're not giving us real figures so that we can really develop in the correct way. So that was a comment from him. There might be an opportunity to ask that question directly later on, but I just wanted to throw that out that it's no good saying we just want more of this and we just want more of that. You're expecting them to invest a heck of a lot of money. They want to know more directly exactly what that means. There was an incident in India with the rail. Someone from the Ministry of Rail in India was told that a certain car maker wanted to railhead and rail infrastructure going directly into their plant. She had to fight hard with the government to get that investment and to get that put in place. When she was ready, she fought with the battles, went to the car maker and said, I think we can do this. This is what we plan to do. And the car maker said, to be honest, our volumes aren't that high, so we'll probably just stick with the road. So these are the thoughts. We have to share the right information, relevant information to help them, to help us. And that's really just a rough comment.
I think you stumped them, Louis, so. No, but thank you for that. Well, I mean, Chris and Mercedes, you are sharing some figures, certainly in terms of border crossings. I mean, is this, I would imagine you're open to share these with the government. Are you in dialogue, or are you kind of having these exchanges?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Louis. I think the key is being more specific on the priorities of the infrastructure that's needed, more so than talking, as you said, in general terms. We talk specifically about between Monterey and the border. Obviously that corridor is what we all use. So maybe we haven't been as direct and as good as we need to be to really make that a priority. I mean, I will give credit though. I mean, if you've spent a lot of time in Mexico as I have, the overall highway infrastructure definitely has improved in the last 10 years. I mean, there's been a lot of highway development between the major cities and through areas that didn't really exist before. So I see that evolving, and it continuing to. But if we can get better at prioritizing, helping them prioritize, then I think it would benefit everyone even more.
Yeah, maybe perhaps the AMIA is one of the avenues. I mean, many of us attend to those meetings and then trying to find what are going to be the key projects that we want to address to for example, the Secretary of Transportation. I mean, that's something that I don't think, like Chris is saying, we have been doing a good job in the past, but this is the moment to make a change.
Great, very good. Any other comments?
Chris, if I may?
Oh, sorry, yes, of course.
Louis, I think you bring up a great point, and I think one of the challenges to doing that is that you're talking about a hyper-competitive industry. And so it's very unusual to cooperate, or share highly accurate information. So typically what is shared might be less than optimal. And I think it really is an opportunity for the associations to play a role in that, where maybe that specific information can be relayed to the association and then it's amalgamated and passed on to the government, so it's still accurate but not as discrete, so people are more comfortable giving that information.
Absolutely, yeah, but I think AMIA is certainly a good point. The U.S.-Mexico Chamber of Commerce has been here as another platform that we would encourage you to use. In our next session, we are scheduled to have a representative from the Ministry of Communication and Transport, so barring any massive traffic jams or infrastructure bottlenecks, hopefully you will be here. But obviously this is partly what we're all here as well, to improve. Any last points or questions from the audience? Perhaps just my last comment. Obviously, we've been talking about border crossings, maybe largely focused on the U.S., Mexico. Mercedes, of course, indicated some of the rail infrastructure and improvements in the ports that are coming or hoped or were planned. But I thought maybe we might touch a little bit on some of the global links. Chris, I know for Nissan, certainly you mentioned the global platforms and the Renault-Nissan alliance, and indeed I think Mexico is probably a growing hub as an export center as well. So can you give us a little bit of insight of how the global import-export operations in Mexico are kind of working relative to the U.S.-Mexico? Well, obviously it's a different type of operation, but do you see issues that need to be improved there, or is it running smoothly?
Well, I think and obviously we do have a substantial base here for export operations. That goes back to what I shared. Really, the more we drive for localization of parts, that also grows the requirement of exporting those parts to our affiliates, mainly in South America. So again, that's just another side of the growth that we have to continue to plan for, and make sure that we have the right capacity, whether it's ocean containers flowing in and out, the port capacities, and the inland, all the inland operations that have to happen as well. But yeah, we foresee our growth from an export side is pretty significant year over year. So we don't see any reason why it would stop, as everything, that really the base keeps growing here. Yeah.
Okay, well, if nobody else has any more points or comments to add, I think that's a reasonable place to end it. I want to thank our panel for their great presentations and the time in the Q&A here. Let me just remind everybody again about those evaluation forms. Please hold them and remember to fill them in. Join us now for coffee, and we'll have another great session back here at 11 o'clock.